The galaxy lived by an old prophecy. It was written in symbols carved into dead moons and copied into glowing archives. Every spacefaring people knew it by heart, even if they argued about its meaning. The prophecy spoke of a small species that would decide the future of all others. It did not say how. It did not say when. It only said that when the choice came, the galaxy would change forever. Most civilizations believed the prophecy pointed to an ancient race. They spoke of beings made of light, or giants who once shaped stars with their hands. Some believed it was about a lost empire that would return. Others said it was only a story meant to give comfort during dark ages. Almost no one thought it could mean humans. Humans were too new, too fragile, too short-lived. They were listed in many records as adaptable but weak, clever but unstable. Certainly not the kind of species that shaped destiny. On the edge of settled space, a quiet frontier station drifted between trade routes. It was called Haven Reach, though there was little about it that felt safe or important. It was a place where cargo was logged, signals were checked, and people waited for something better. James worked there as an analyst. He spent his days reading data streams and sorting reports that most others ignored. Emily worked beside him, calm and focused, her eyes always moving as if she could see patterns hiding between numbers. They had worked together for years. Neither of them expected to find anything important. That was why the strange signal caught their attention. It came from deep space, weak and broken, repeating in a way that felt wrong. James noticed it first. He leaned closer to the screen and frowned. The signal did not match any known ship or beacon. It was older than most active routes. Emily checked the source and froze. "It's tied to Earth," she said softly. James laughed once, short and tired. "That can't be right." Emily did not smile. She pulled up old records, some of them sealed and rarely opened. The signal pattern matched fragments found in early human probes, the kind sent before humans even left their own system. That alone was strange. Those probes should have been silent by now, broken by time and radiation. James ran the data again. The signal did not just match human tech. It appeared near places where humans had changed outcomes. Old trade disputes that ended without war. Rescue missions where survival rates were impossible. Systems marked as lost that later recovered after human contact. The signal was never strong. It was always there like a shadow. Emily felt a slow chill. "James," she said, "humans weren't supposed to survive this long out here." He nodded. The records were clear. Early models predicted human colonies would fail. Bodies too soft. Minds too emotional. Resources too limited. And yet humans kept showing up. They adapted. They repaired instead of replaced. They stayed when others left. James opened a restricted file. It listed events marked as anomalies. The list was longer than he expected. Every entry had a small note added later, often by different species, often in frustration. Human presence confirmed. Outcome altered. Emily leaned back in her chair. "Why hasn't anyone noticed this?" "They probably have," James said. "They just didn't think it mattered." Outside the station, ships passed in slow silence. Inside, the hum of machines filled the air. James felt a strange weight in his chest. He had grown up hearing the prophecy like everyone else. He had imagined great beings and burning stars. Never once had he thought of ordinary people fixing broken systems and sharing food in cold halls. Emily highlighted a final line in the records. It was old, written by a long-dead observer. The translation was poor, but the meaning was clear enough. "The future is not chosen by strength, but by those who remain." James stared at the words. Humans were known for many things, but leaving was not one of them. They stayed in failing colonies. They stayed with damaged ships. They stayed with allies who were afraid. The signal pulsed again, faint but steady. Emily saved the data under a new tag. She did not name it prophecy. She named it persistence. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Somewhere far away, Earth turned quietly, unaware that old stories were beginning to point its way again. The galaxy waited, as it always had, for a choice it did not yet understand. The council chamber was hidden deep inside a neutral station, far from any single border. It was not marked on public maps, and most beings who worked nearby did not know it existed. Only selected leaders and observers were allowed inside. Michael and Jessica entered together, their steps quiet on the smooth floor. Both wore simple clothing meant to show neutrality, but they could feel the weight of the meeting before it even began. The room slowly filled with representatives from many species. Some were tall and thin, others wide and heavy, others shaped in ways humans could barely describe. Lights dimmed as the doors sealed shut. A symbol appeared in the air above the center of the room. It was older than the council itself. It was the mark of the prophecy. The discussion was secret. Even speaking about the prophecy openly was considered risky. Many believed that naming it too clearly might force it to happen. Michael listened as older members spoke in careful words. They talked about rising tension, broken alliances, and systems that no longer trusted each other. The prophecy was mentioned as a warning, not a hope. Jessica noticed the tone right away. There was fear in the room, hidden under calm voices. When the question was finally asked, it came out slowly. What if the prophecy is active? The room grew still. Some looked away. Others made sounds of disbelief. One delegate laughed, a sharp and unpleasant sound. It has always been active, they said. That does not mean it is near. David, a research observer seated near the back, had been silent until then. He had spent years studying ancient texts and failed predictions. He did not look at the speakers. Instead, he studied the symbols floating above the table. He had noticed something strange long ago, but only recently had it begun to make sense. He requested permission to speak. When granted, he stood and shared his findings. He did not talk about power or war. He spoke of patterns. He spoke of warning signs listed in the prophecy. Not disasters but behaviors. Patience during long decline. Repair instead of replacement. A refusal to quit even when logic said to stop. As he spoke, the room shifted. Some leaned forward. Others crossed their limbs in discomfort. These signs, David said simply, match human behavior. For a moment there was silence. Then laughter spread across the chamber. Not all at once but enough to drown out the idea. Humans, one voice said. They barely live long enough to matter. They argue among themselves, another added. They break as often as they fix. Michael felt heat rise in his chest but stayed silent. Jessica kept her eyes forward, her face calm. She had expected this. Humans were always underestimated. It was easier that way for others. David did not argue. He only showed records. Slow evacuations where humans stayed behind to help others leave. Stations repaired with outdated tools because humans refused to abandon them. Long supply runs made by ships that should not have survived the journey. These are not acts of strength, David said. They are acts of endurance. More laughter followed, though some voices were quieter now. Doubt had entered the room. One council member waved a limb dismissively. Endurance does not decide the future. Sometimes it does, David replied. The meeting moved on, but the idea could not be fully pushed aside. Michael noticed Daniel sitting at a side console, quiet and unnoticed. Daniel was a record keeper, not a leader. His job was to update files, track classifications, and make sure history stayed neat and ordered. As the council argued, Daniel reviewed the human profile. It was old and full of assumptions. Weak, emotional, short-lived. He hesitated only once before adding a new note. He did not change their status. He only added a small line at the end. Unconfirmed but persistent. When the meeting ended, nothing official had changed. No announcements were made. No warnings were sent. But as Michael and Jessica left the chamber, both felt the same uneasy thought. The prophecy was no longer pointing at legends. It was pointing at people who refused to give up. The crisis began quietly, which made it worse. One trade route failed, then another. Ships arrived late or not at all. Fuel depots reported empty docks. Food shipments drifted off course and went dark. At first, leaders blamed bad data or local errors. Then panic spread as whole systems realized they were no longer connected the way they depended on. Markets froze. Stations closed their gates. Some species pulled back their fleets to protect their own worlds. Others accused neighbors of sabotage. Old fears returned fast. The council sent warnings, but they were slow and careful, and the crisis moved faster than words. On a small logistics hub near the broken routes, John watched ships line up with nowhere to go. He was not a commander. He was a coordinator, the kind who knew how to read broken schedules and tired faces. Ashley stood beside him, checking lists and rerouting what little they had. Around them, alarms blinked and voices argued in different languages. Many crews refused to enter the damaged zones. Navigation was unstable. Old beacons failed. The areas were marked unsafe. John understood the fear. The maps did look bad. But he also saw something else. The failures followed patterns, not chaos. Things were broken, not cursed. He gathered a small human team. No one volunteered loudly. They simply stepped forward and nodded. Mechanics, medics, pilots, cooks. People used to making do. They did not arrive with weapons or demands. They arrived with tools, spare parts, and boxes of food. When other species challenged them, John spoke calmly. He did not claim authority. He asked questions. He listened to complaints. He shared what little information he had. Ashley worked the long hours, sleeping in short bursts. She traded favors for access to old maps and forgotten maintenance logs. She smiled when others shouted. She wrote notes by hand when systems failed. In the broken zones they found the truth. Relays were old and overloaded. No attack. No enemy. Just years of strain ignored because replacing everything was easier than fixing it. Humans fixed it anyway. They patched lines with mismatched parts. They cleaned systems others had sealed and abandoned. When power failed, they shared food and waited together. When tempers rose, they listened. Sometimes that was enough. Lauren arrived as an observer, sent to report on the human response. She expected chaos or arrogance. Instead, she saw quiet work. She saw humans eating with strangers, laughing softly in dark halls, passing tools without asking for thanks. One night, as a relay finally came back online, cheers echoed through the station. Lauren watched John sit down heavily, exhausted, grease on his hands. He did not look proud. He looked relieved. She thought of the prophecy. Of all the talk of power and control. Of crowns and fear. She finally understood the mistake. The prophecy never promised strength. It promised endurance. And humans had it in abundance. The council watched from a distance as reports came in. At first they did not believe them. Systems marked as failing were stabilizing. Trade routes once declared lost were opening again. Ships returned with full logs and tired crews, not stories of battle. Again and again the same note appeared at the end of each report. Human teams present. Stronger species had tried before. They had sent fleets, security forces, and specialists with perfect tools. They had failed because they moved too fast, demanded control, and left when results did not come quickly. Humans stayed. They waited. They fixed small things first. The council could not ignore the pattern any longer. Old records were pulled from deep archives. Texts no one had touched in generations were reopened. Scholars argued over symbols and faded marks. The prophecy was translated again, slowly and carefully, without pride. This time they did not search for names or power. They searched for meaning. The words changed when read without fear. The prophecy did not speak of rulers or conquerors. It did not promise victory through force. It spoke of a choice made again and again in small moments. A choice to protect life when it was easier to rule it. A choice to stay when leaving felt safer. One line stood out, clearer than before. The future belongs to those who carry others through the dark. Silence filled the chamber. Leaders began to understand what humanity truly represented. Humans did not seek the center of power. They worked at the edges. They did not demand praise. They did not ask to lead. But wherever they went, things endured. Fear grew, not because humans were violent but because they were reliable. They could not be scared away. They could not be bought easily. They did not collapse when plans failed. They adapted. Some council members whispered about control. About limiting human expansion. Others spoke of partnership. The debate was tense and quiet, filled with unease. Outside the chamber, ships continued to move. Trade resumed. Life went on. The council realized the truth too late to stop it. The prophecy was never about domination. It was about the ones who chose to protect life, no matter the cost. The announcement did not come with ceremony. There were no banners, no fleets gathering in formation, no grand speech sent across the stars. The council released a simple statement, quiet and clear. The prophecy was declared fulfilled. It did not name a victory or an end. It only marked a moment of understanding. Across the galaxy, reactions were mixed. Some felt relief. Others felt unease. A few felt shame. Humanity was not crowned and no one knelt before them. They were not feared either. Instead, they were accepted as guides and partners, a role that felt strange even to humans themselves. On the frontier station where it had begun, James sat alone at his console. The room was calm, filled with the steady hum of working systems. He opened the final report, the one that would close 1,000 arguments and begin 1,000 more. His hands moved slowly as he reviewed the data one last time. Trade routes stable. Conflict reduced. Recovery ongoing. He paused, thinking of Emily, of John and Ashley, of all the humans who had never known they were part of something larger. They had not followed a prophecy. They had followed habits learned over long years. Fix what you can. Share what you have. Stay a little longer. James added the last lines. He did not use grand words. He did not mention destiny. He wrote the truth as simply as he could. Humanity chose to remain when withdrawal was easier. Outcomes improved. When he sent the report, nothing dramatic happened. No alarms sounded. No lights changed. But across the galaxy something settled. Borders felt less sharp. Messages came faster. Trust, slow and fragile, began to grow. Ships traveled routes once feared. Stations reopened old halls. Mixed crews worked side by side, sharing meals and quiet rooms. Humans did not lead from thrones. They led by example, often without realizing it. James leaned back and looked out through the wide window. Stars stretched across the dark, steady and bright. They felt closer now, not because humanity had reached out to claim them, but because they had waited, repaired, and stayed. The galaxy moved forward, not ruled, not conquered, but connected.